Hey guys, this is Gunner again. Well, here is part 3 of Cheerilee's Garden. I already got past the first gore scene, and I think that was pretty creative, I guess. Uh, anyways, if you probably hear, I'm probably not gonna do the accents again. Um, as you know, I'm not really good at it. So, and at least I'm trying. So. Well, anyways, here's part 3 of Cheerilee's Garden. Cheerilee finally got back to her spot at the prompt's corner, still giddy with excitement. She started at this stage without really seeing it, and it took her a few moments to notice that she hadn't started paying attention to the play yet, at all yet. She was still savoring Scootaloo's last moments in her mind's eye. She shook her head a few times to get a grip and focus on the stage in front of her. Once she did that, it didn't take her long to figure out what scene they were currently on, and Cheerilee had to suppress another rush of excitement as she realized her next playtime wasn't all that far off. She saw Silver Spoon in her black noble's outfit and Diamond Tiara in her dark purple gown of the royal advisor approached Reginald's cottage. Based on where the scene fitted to the story, that meant Cheerilee had missed the scenes involving Lancelot's broken lance being delivered back to the royal court, as well as the ones where the king decided who to send next. Cheerilee didn't mind having missed these at all. They didn't interest her. She only cared about what was to come next. The pink mare was very happy with the set pieces that formed Reginald's cottage. Considered them to be very nicely made. Instead of an actual closed-off building, only the back wall and the left wall have been put into place, giving the audience a clear view of the building's interior. She didn't want to aggrandize her own word, but she was quite proud of the way in which she made this all fit together through her plans and instructions. With care and caution, my dear Diamas, the great filly with the silver mane said, that's the only way to deal with a pony like him, if you want to harbor any hope of coming out on top, that is. The white and purple maned filly nodded thoughtfully. But of course, Silver Tongue, I am well aware, and of course, in our case, even more thoughtfulness is required. Are not simply telling them to stand down after all. The two ponies exchanged a grin as they walked down the path towards Reginald's front door, which was placed on the wall on the right side of the house. Of course, the wall itself hadn't been built on stage, but the audience got the idea behind it easily enough. The two fillies nodded back and forth in front of the door until Silvertongue finally leaned enough with the side and knocked down the door. The audience could see a small door open at the back of Reginald's house, as the antagonist himself stepped through it in his living room, carrying a teapot which he put down into the table in the center of the room. Next to the 3 cups that were already there, visitors at this hour of night. Visitors at this hour of the night. I wonder who it could be. The villain said louder than was perhaps needed, with the fourth wall breaking wink at the audience. He strolled over to the door and opened it, but left the door chained in place. Yes? He asked while peeping through the small opening he had created. I wasn't expecting any visitors today. Forget the pleasantries, Reginald dear, the silver-maned filly said. We know who you are. Diamas finished the sentence for her companion. Reginald's frown was clearly visible even to the people in the back of the theater. Then why not? Surely you don't believe I let you in just so you can apprehend me. The pair of fillies laughed. Apprehend you? No, my dear No, my dear, you have this all won. We don't want to apprehend you. We want to work with you, to take care of the king, once and for all. The fillies remained silent for a moment before Diamas added, We know you're a reasonable guy, Reginald. This will be beneficial to you as well. Reginald closed the door and took the chain off before finally opening it. Alright, come in, he said as he walked to the table in the middle of the room. He grabbed the teapot and stood there by the ear, carefully pouring tea into the 3 cups on the table. Let's hear what you have to say then, he said as he started sipping from one of the cups. The other 2 gathered around the table as well, each in front of the other 2 cups, which they stared at with suspicion. How exactly do we know you haven't poisoned these? Silvertongue demanded to know. How do you know I didn't poison the tea I prepared without knowing you coming that I'm drinking myself? Reginald mockingly replied. The other team seemed to relax at this train of thought, sipping from their mugs slowly. It had been a rather long trip, and the ladies of style, they did enjoy their daily cup of tea. Diamas opened her mouth to start negotiations when she suddenly felt silent and stared at the cups on the table. 3 cups. If you didn't know we were coming, why are there she started before pressing a hoof up against her head as she took an unsteady step from the table. Oh, stars, you did poison us, but you drank. How? Silver said shakingly as she sank to her knees. It was in the cups, not in the tea, Snips described as he took another sip. The 2 fillies were swaying about theatrically now, until Diamas suddenly blurted out, Wait, my head! It was really poisoned! Before both she and Silver toppled over onto the ground. Yes, I really poisoned it. Snip said, that wasn't in the script. He walked over to the metal ring on the floor and grabbed it between his teeth, pulling it up to reveal a trapdoor. He dragged the perfectly still fillies to the trapdoor one at a time, throwing them into the hole before closing it again. And there they'll rot. Reginald doesn't deal with traitors. They're too traitorous. He mused as he exited the stage through the door in the back of the house, the stage light slowly going out. By the time the curtains closed and the lights above the audience went on to signal the half-show break, Cheerilee was already long gone from her seat from the prompts corner, making her way to an unknown destination under the stage. Silver Spoon woke up feeling groggy, her senses still blurred by whatever that had been in those cups. She was vaguely aware of the well-lit circular room with lots of metallic objects casting the glimmer of reflections everywhere. She tried moving her head but found, to her great shock and surprise, that she could not. The sudden panic she felt helped clear her senses in a matter of moments, and her sight quickly returned to her. Fear gripped her when she found she could not move her legs except for her front left one, which she could move slightly. It felt as if some metallic bands anchored them to the ground, and something was likewise keeping her from closing her eyes. The taste of iron filled her mouth, since it was being held open by some sort of cylinder. Her tongue rested inside of the cylinder, and she could move it about freely. The fact she capitalized on as she explored the inside. It wasn't solid by any means. It felt more like a frame that held a basic cylindrical shape, but she couldn't bite down onto it or spit it out, no matter how hard she tried. Attempts at moving her body proved pointless as well. Apart from the bands around her hooves and whatever she kept her head in place, something was pulling her up around her middle, so she couldn't slouch down either. Realizing she wouldn't get out of this predicament on her own, She looked around the room as best she could. The first thing she noticed was a grotesque machine, a mess of metallic arms, wheels, and various tools which extend from a central black box. It seemed it seemed to be on rails, and Silver noted some of these rails ran towards her as well, but she couldn't look down to see where they ended, as she wasn't able to determine the machine's use or function. She quickly lost interest. It was then that she finally saw Diamond Tiara a few meters to the right of the machine and trapped in much the same way she was. It was to say her hoofs had been attached to the ground with metal clamps, as she had a leather band around her middle as well, which was attached to the ceiling with chains. She wasn't wearing her costume anymore, which made Silver realize she couldn't feel hers on her body either. On top of on top of on top of all that, there was a glass wall all around Tiara, with the fillies standing in the center of the glass cylinder. It seemed like the whole construction could be lifted out of its place by a few chains connected to the top of the glass wall. It was only reached halfway up to the ceiling. Spoon also spotted several tubes and hoses opening into the cylinder, but nothing seemed to be coming out of them for now. Tiara's head was fixed to look in the gray filly's direction, and freaky little metal clamps held their eyes open. She didn't appear to have anything in her mouth though, and Silver Spoon didn't think she was even awake yet. Spoon's eyes slowly started drying out, but before the sensation could become unbearable, some kind of liquid dripped down into her eyes, moistening them up. Silver shuddered to think about the reasons anyone could have strapped her into so elaborate a device. But she managed to keep her calm. It was possible they had accidentally been poisoned, and that was a high-tech medical facility after all. She didn't really believe it herself, but the thought did keep her from screaming right then and there. The thought and the thing in her mouth, she was forced to admit it. Right then, Diamond Tiara woke up, as she didn't seem to possess Silver Spoon's calm disposition. She immediately shrieked when she found out she was being held immobile in a glass bowl, until her eyes fell on the gray filly a few meters away from her. Silver Spoon, what's going on? Where are we? Get me out! She cried. Silver tried to respond, but her only reply of "I don't know, calm down," wasn't of much use to Diamond. "Finally awake, I see," said a calm voice accompanied by hoof steps as Cheerilee stepped into the room. Diamond immediately started calling out for help, but Cheerilee paid her no heed. She seemed far more interested in Spoon and the machine in the middle. "So let's get started, shall we?" she said as she walked right in between the two fillies, pulling down a lever on the machine's right side. At once it zoomed to life, little lights flickering on all around as its metallic arms swung down and moved into place. Cheerilee walked over to the gray filly, who was now positively terrified, and whispered into her ear, "You have no idea how much research and measuring up you went into this, but I got it all right, you see. You'll see." "What do you mean?" The filly asked in confusion, but Cheerilee simply shook her head and smiled as she took a few steps back. "Oh, and if you feel around with that free leg of yours, you should find a button. Just hold it down if you had enough. But I warned you, your friend won't like it," Cheerilee said, giggling girlishly at the end of her sentence. Spoon tried to follow her teacher with her gaze, being both utterly confused and terrified at the same time. But Cheerilee quickly disappeared from her narrow field of vision. Her attention was suddenly grabbed by the strange device in the center of the room, as it started rolling towards her. At first, the silver filly just watched in bewilderment until she spotted one of the robotic arms lifting a metal needle up to the same height as her left eye, keeping it there as it advanced. If her eyelids aren't already artificially being held open, her eyes would have grown wide in fear when she realized what was about to happen there. What? Don't do it! Get me out! She begged, getting more spit out of her mouth than intelligible words. She saw the tip of the needle slowly come closer to her as she tried to wrestle free for bonds. She came to the same conclusion she had before. She'd never get free on her own. She racked her brain for a way out as she started to panic, until she suddenly remembered Cheer's words. She felt around her left hoof, and sure enough, she bumped into a slightly elevated point on the floor. The button. Without hesitation, she pushed down on it, and the needle came to an immediate halt about 5 centimeters from her face. She sighed in relief. That had been a lot easier than she had expected. Maybe it was a test, and now that she had passed it, Cheerilee would. She never got to finish her train of thought as Dementiara's terrifying scream pierced her eardrums. Looking at the machine with her right eye, Spoon focused her gaze on the glass tank her friend was in. Some kind of clear liquid was now flowing into the tank from various pipes and hoses on the side, and it was slowly spreading over the floor. Silver Spoon quickly drew the connection between her pressing the button, the machine stopping, and the liquid starting to fill up the tank. But compared to her losing an eye, she thought Diamond could afford to get wet for a while. The light pink filly didn't seem to agree, as she screamed fearfully, "Spoon, help me get out of here!" Spoon rolled her eyes as best as she could at this. What could she do to help anyway? The level of the quote-unquote water in the tank kept rising, and as it finally got high enough to touch the bottom of Diamond's legs, Silver Spoon realized her mistake. She watched in horror as her friend screamed in pain, a cloud of red blood diffusing into the clear liquid as it ate away at the filly's flesh. What Spoon had assumed to be water was obviously acid of some description, and it was a safe bet that Diamond had smelled that ages ago. The corrosive liquid continued to pour into the glass tank, chunks of flesh already becoming loose from just above Diamond's hooves as they got soaked in it. The white of the bone became visible quickly, and Tiara screamed and begged for Cheerilee or Spoon, or any pony really, to make it stop. Do you like it? They use that stuff to clean carcasses, you know. Get some nice skeletons and display in the classroom. Silver heard her teacher say from behind her. She reluctantly looked at the needle still suspended in the air in front of her, and then took a deep breath. Summoning all her courage, with her tears rolling out of the corner of her eyes, she slowly slid her hoof off the button. At once, the machine buzzed to life again, and the flow of the acid in the glass tank stopped. Diamond Tiara shrieked heartbreakingly for a while longer, before dying down to sobbing as the last piece of flesh touching the voracious liquid got melted right off of her bones. She had nothing but bone left up 2 centimeters from her hoof up. A small stream of blood was flowing down into the acid from the frayed and disfigured stump of meat just above it. The scarlet clouds that floated around in the vicious liquid vanished quickly as well, apparently no more resistant to the corrosion that Diamond's flesh was. Spoon's lips trembled as the needle approached her eye, filling more and more of her field of vision. Then, after what seemed like an eternity, it finally reached its destination. The silver filly felt a pressure in her eye increased for a moment, before the needle suddenly popped in and pain exploded inside her head. She let an unintelligible, garbled scream as pain receptors she never imagined existed bombarded her mind with warning signals, telling her something was wrong, not knowing or caring about the fact that she was powerless to do anything about it. Her left side of her vision was colored red, and then suddenly winked out, as half of her world darkened forever. Silver Spoon momentarily forgot her pain, as she wondered why she had never realized how much her sight meant to her until that moment. Agony once again washed over her as the two little hooks sprung up out of the tip of the needle, anchoring themselves into her eyeball. The needles started to spin around, and Silver almost threw up right there as she felt her eye start turn with it. Her hoarse cries echoed through the room as the device spun its appendage around faster and faster, winding her optical nerves like a bored child would a piece of string. The painful sensory overload was too much for the little filly to bear, and shame got added to her torment as she lost control of her bladder. The needles suddenly drew back, taking her eye with it as she felt warm drip down her cheek. She wanted to scream and push her hoof up against her now empty socket, but her stomach protested so much that she needed all of her willpower in order not to throw up all over herself. And even her left leg was too restricted to get her hoof up all the way. She panted heavily into the metal cylinder as sweat dripped down her body, and the machine withdrew slightly, holding up the skewered eye that once belonged to her like a trophy. At that point, Silver Spoon noticed Diamond Tiara looking at her from the corner of her eye, and her friend looked even more sick to the stomach than she was feeling herself. But the Silver Filly saw yet another emotion in the pink filly's eyes: hope and gratefulness. She reminded herself that her suffering might yet save her friend, as perhaps Cheerilee would let Tiara go if she just preserved. She built up an amazing fortress of resolve, which melted like ice before the sun as she saw the machine drew closer once more. It had replaced the arm of the needle in favor of one of four sharp blades coming together like a tip of some kind of drill. The menacing contraption started to spin around at high speeds, accompanied by a low buzzing noise, as it drew even nearer. It didn't take Silver Spoon long to figure out that it wasn't aimed at her remaining eye, though with only one eye she found it somewhat hard to determine its trajectory. Suddenly she swallowed it as best as she could as it dawned on her, and the rest of the cylinder in her mouth became chillingly clear. She hesitated for a moment. But just before the blades entered her mouth, she pressed down on the button once again. At once she heard Diamond Tiara scream at the very first drops that flowed out of the pipes, raising the literal vitriol enough to contact her soft, tender flesh, starting the suffering of the pink filly all over again. "Silver Spoon! Silver Spoon!" she cried, apparently too much in pain to think of anything better. Silver Spoon cried clear tears from her right eye and bloody ones from her socket as she sobbed. I'm sorry," over and over, shaking in disgust of her own perceived cowardice. But as Diamond's flesh slowly got consumed by the vicious agent, it became clear that Cheerilee had a few more tricks up her sleeve. A loud banging noise announced the arrival of four small but heavy balls, which came rolling through as yet unused pipes, only to plummet down on the bath of acid below. The deceptively innocent-looking liquid splashed up around them, raining down upon the purple and white-maned pony from every direction. Small drops fell down onto her back, melting holes through her coat and skin, leaving tiny bloody craters behind as a sort of grotesque parody of a lunar landscape. At the same time, a bigger wave of the stuff crashed right onto her right flank, her cutie mark melting away as the vitriol dug into her body, bloody blisters boiling up around the edges of her wounds. She instantly felt an extreme burning sensation on her left shoulder as well, but by far the worst was the splash that hit her right in the face. She shrieked like a banshee as it burned through her right cheek, exposing muscles and white bones, and offering a view of the inside of her mouth. In a matter of minutes, her appearance changed from that of a cute filly into that of a monster, with half of her face missing and the rest of her body covered in bloody blisters, craters and sores. Not quite unlike how some ponies might picture a zombie. In addition to that, the acid had kept melting away the flesh from her legs as well, having reached up just under her knees now. Silver Spoon couldn't bear it any longer. Pulled her hoof off the bun, determined to never press it down ever again, no matter what the cost. She swallowed back her fear as the blade started spinning again and approached her. She had liked the name of her character in the play, Silvertongue, which was exactly how she viewed herself. She had always thought she had a knack for using words to suit her own purpose, and would perhaps have gone far in the diplomacy business, or something like that one day. She thought it likely that Cheerilee knew this as well, and didn't doubt that this was also some sort of sick joke to her. She couldn't understand the teacher's reasons or motivations, and in just a few idle seconds she'd never be able to ask. What? She tried screaming out, but no answer ever came as the blades passed her lips. A maelstrom of cuts and slices rained down upon the tip of her tongue, as the blades tore into it. Hot blood filled her mouth, slipping down her throat, and dripped down her chin as she tried to scream, but only she managed to produce a disgusting wet gurgling noise from the back of her throat. Her body shook, and her one remaining eye rolled back in her head, as the knights continued their bloody work. They advanced slowly, and to Spoon it seemed slower still, as she experienced pain of such a magnitude that the loss of her eye paled in comparison. Bit by bit, her tongue got shredded, and the remaining stump of it flailed around wildly as she tried to keep it out of reach, but the blades were everywhere. Suddenly, the machine stopped and pulled back, having made mincemeat out of every last part of Silver's tongue. The steering needles that had been poking around in her mouth turned into an intense but monotonous pain, which was only broken by the pounding sensation she felt where her tongue had once been. Even in her dazed and sickened state, she felt an acute need to breathe, as the blood that had flown down her throat threatened to drown her. With a hacking cough and a surge of energy born from desperation, she managed to force the blood up and out of her throat, making it spill out of her mouth and cascade down her body like a waterfall. With the stabbing sensation in her empty socket and the pounding of her mouth, Spoon could barely think straight anymore. It was as if the pain had become her only reality, and it blocked everything else out. She tried to speak, but could produce only a low guttural sound, which made her envious of Diamond's constant moans and sobs as she's still able to consciously register them. Cheerilee noticed the lack of resistance in Silver and was thoroughly disappointed. Sure, the crying and the sounds she made were amusing, but it wasn't quite what she was hoping for. Scootaloo had put up a better fight than that. She walked over to the machine and turned it off, moving to the side of the room, and picked up a small bag of tools she had left there, just in case. No matter how well she had calibrated all those machines, Cheerilee harbored no illusions. When it finally came down to it, she could only count on herself to get the job done right. She took out a hammer and a chisel and put them down next to the only semi-conscious Silver Spoon. In the absence of any digits, such as the ones the Griffins had, ponies had to find a different way to hold the chisel in place as they swung the hammer. The solution came in the form of a metal shoe, which extended past the hoof and had a hole in the tip, which could hold the chisel in place. Typically, a chisel and the shoe were made in such a way that the thicker part of the end of the chisel, where the hammer hit, could fit through the hole. Cheerilee slipped on the heavy shoe and put the chisel through the hole with her teeth. before grabbing hold of the hammer in the same way. She positioned she positioned the chisel carefully, aiming it right above the filly's right hoof, just under the metal band, holding her right leg in place. With a great swing, she brought the hammer down, driving the tip of the chisel right into the filly's leg, scraping up against her hoof from above. Silver Spoon, who had been apathetically floating in a sea of pain until now, suddenly let out a piercing, if garbled, shriek as her remaining eye flew wide open. More of her blood started spilling onto the floor, and Cheerilee grinned as best as she could while holding onto the hammer. They were just above a hoof, as one of the most sensitive spots in the pony's body, which was why the hoof protected it so well in the first place. She drew the hammer back and slammed it down again and again, driving the thin metal rod further and further with every swing. The yelps and cries from the filly excited her further and further, and she began to have trouble keeping the hammer in her mouth because her body trembled so. With the last mighty swing, the tip of the chisel suddenly emerged from the other side of the filly's hoof, as the poor thing whimpered in pain and the blood stained the floor in multiple places. With a rush of inspiration, Cheerilee swung the hammer down again, this time aiming not for the thicker bulge at the end, but simply for the side of the chisel as the metal rod stuck horizontally into the filly's leg. The blow pushed the rod down against her hoof, which, already not attached to her leg in the middle anymore, simply broke off, leaving only a bloody stump with some scattered fragments of hoof still attached. The filly let out a gurgling cry of pain as her eye rolled back in its socket, and then suddenly fell silent. Cheerilee frowned as she dropped the hammer and brought her head level to the spoons. The little wretch had fainted. "Oh, come on, not now. It's only starting to get fun." She screamed in frustration as she swung a hoof at the filly's head, hitting her right in the face. There wasn't even the tiniest response, and the pink mare sighed. She quickly started undoing the bindings that held Silver Spoon in place. The filly falling into a pool of her own blood as she slipped out the last ones. Cheer grabbed the filly by her mane and started dragging her to the side of the room, leaving a wide red smudge trailing behind her victim. A portion of the floor had been slightly lowered there, leaving a small depressed circle on the ground, which had been outside of the filly's field of vision so far. Nonchalantly, she threw the filly into the circle, not particularly caring how she landed. She fell down in a crumpled heap in the center and remained there motionlessly, except for the slight heaving in her chest with every breath. Cheerilee then made her way to the glass tank, staring straight into Diamond's eyes. Not completely sure the filly still had the use of her right eye, the acid having taken a heavy toll on that side of her face. Will you let me go?" The filly managed to say hoarsely before obviously nearing the end of her strength. Cheerilee smiled her kindest smile. "But of course, I'll let you go, and Silver Spoon as well, but only if you can reach her." She broke into a grin as she walked to the wall, pulling down one of the levers there. At once, several holes opened in the floor inside of the glass walls, draining away the liquids inside. Once it was mostly gone, she pulled another lever. The glass circle got lifted up off the ground until there was enough space underneath it for a pony to walk upright. At the same time, the filly's bindings automatically released her as she crashed onto the floor from a small height. Her legs, bare bones up to her knees, couldn't support the weight and snapped in two. Sharp fragments of bone jumping away as the pitiful remnants of her lower legs fell back to the sides. As luck would have it, the sharp shard on her right leg buried itself in Diamond's side as she fell onto it. And for the 100th time that evening, Tiara held in pain even while trying to overcome the shock of breaking all of her legs at once. As the little stump she had left hit the ground, a small layer of acid still started biting into her stomach, but the pain paled in comparison to what Diamond Tiara had already been through. She paid it almost no heed as she tried to bite back the agony she was already in. So just get your friend and you're both out of here. Who knows? There might even be unicorn doctors good enough to fix you up. The teacher pony chuckled maliciously. Tiara tried to get up, but as soon as she attempted to rest any weight on the jagged shards of bone now sticking out of her considerably shortened legs, she fell right back down again, panting more heavily than a mare in labor. Even if she hadn't been in pain, it would have been easy to balance on the stumps of the bones at all. For a moment, she thought of giving up right then and there, but she instantly reminded of her bravery her friend had shown every time she refused to push down the button any longer. She owed it to her at least try. It was a few meters to the pit on the ground, so the light pink fillies started to lift her little legs above her head, trying to drag her body forward. Every time she did that, she felt like she was about to faint from the pain, but she pressed down and persevered to save herself and her friend. Cheerilee watched with giddy excitement, taunting the little filly, the filly every step of the way. "Hey, almost there. What's taking you so long? Come on, up the pace," she said, laughing. The filly ignored her as best as he could, and finally reaching the circular pit on the ground. She tried to carefully lower herself into it, but slipped and fell, driving the bone shards still deeper into her side. She once again groaned as she dragged herself into the center of the circle, putting the stumps of her front legs around Silver Spoon in a clumsy hug. "Oh, Spoon," she just managed to say. "Is it done?" The grief filly managed to whisper as she opened her opened eye. The other pony tried to smile at her friend, but the result was grotesque at best. We'll be okay. She'll let us go. I reached you." "Yeah, about that," came Cheerilee's cold voice as she pulled down yet another lever. "I lied." Both of the fillies looked up as they heard a rumbling noise coming from a pipe above them, and as they saw familiar clear liquid gush down, they realized they wouldn't get to see anything else ever again. Damn! If I didn't hate Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon right now, I would probably feel sorry for them. Man, this is some straight up Saw shit right there. Oh. Anyways, yeah, that was part 3. Part 4, I'll be working on part 4 tomorrow, and I'll try to get it as much as I can. So, all right, this is Game Mullins 2-in-1. Signing off.